Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Beng Hooi from the Alumni Affairs Office. Welcome to our NTU International Alumni Webinar Series. This afternoon, we're very happy to have all of you joining us in Singapore. All colleagues are working from home, and I'm sure many of you are. So, to kick off today's session, I'm happy to welcome Professor Hsia, Vice President, Alumni and International Affairs, to give us his opening remarks. Professor Hsia, please.
Thank you very much, Beng Hooi. Again, welcome to all of you to this webinar series that our Alumni Affairs Office started to conduct. I don't know if you hear the background noise. It's raining pretty hard and the thunder pretty loudly. But anyway, this is our first, we started this idea of having a webinar series for our alumni some time ago. And when we started it, our plan was to organize the webinar series in Singapore and then inviting alumni to participate in it. Then things changed. COVID-19 hit. And because of that, we cannot get out of our house, at least in Singapore, and I think in many other parts of the world as well. So we are facing the challenge of how to continue this idea. Then it occurred to our very talented Alumni Affairs Office staff members that, this is a crisis. If I may quote the famous statement from Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they thought about this and they turned it around and making it opportunity for all of us. So now we are having this webinar series using Zoom. And by doing that, we are able to have people from all over the world, alumni from all over the world, participating in the webinar series. Actually, today we have people from certainly not only from Singapore, but from India, from the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and many other places. So this is an opportunity that we should use. And I'm so glad that our alumni office, thought about this and take advantage of this crisis, turn it around an opportunity. And indeed, today's seminar is very much relevant to this so-called crisis, perhaps maybe opportunity. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this and give us feedback. What you thought about after the seminar, what you thought about this. And these things are recorded. So eventually, we will be able to provide the information to all alumni who cannot join us today, for them to participate remotely and in the future. Thank you very much. Welcome again.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for the opening remarks. So, global pandemic, COVID-19 and its impact on SMEs and startups. So that's the topic of the day. And of course, I must also add that the speakers from our Malaysia Alumni Association. Speaking first, we have Mr. Chris Choy. He is an IoT generalist and co-founder, MD, of a firm called FIFOYO. And he's the developer of Build ID IoT platform. So he will speak to us first. And we have a second speaker after Chris. His name is Lim Chin Beng. He is the executive director of Taiko Odyssey Sendirian Berhad. He's the MD of Strong Force Sendirian Berhad. So to kick off this afternoon's session, please welcome Mr. Chris Choy.
First of all, thank you for all of you who is online now. And thanks for taking the time to dial in from wherever you are. And also a special thanks to NTU. I think this is a great opportunity for a small internet setup like mine to share with you how the COVID-19 has either impacted our business or impacted our environment. A little bit of commercial. NTU AA Malaysia was incorporated in 2014, and existingly we have 3,000 members with us, 3,000 plus members with us, and this is a great opportunity as for us to align with the NTU and fellow alumni. So, and the topic is great. It's a very difficult topic, but I think it's a very interesting topic. Without further ado, let me share you what I'm going to talk about in the next 10 to 15 minutes. First, I'd like to share with you all my view of what is this world of COVID-19 pandemic, then the scenarios that will impact us in terms of business environment, and then closer to home to where I'm sitting, how it has impacted my business from a macro and a micro angle. First, there was a spread. Next, there was a fear. I still remember we ran out of toilet papers, we ran out of masks, we ran out of just about anything that you can think about, right? So there was a lot of fear. And then we tried to adapt. We tried to be able to work from home. And right now, using technology like what we are using now, we try to continue our way of life. But we are cheating ourselves. There will be no old world. There will be a new world. So with the next couple of slides, let me share with you from what I've read, what the new world will look like. Be in lockdown. Maybe now, 100%, right? Every single economy is affected by it. Would there be a potential depression? Right? Collapse in commercial activity, I think all of us have sensed it, right? It's a given. Will we go into a depression? A lot of efforts done by countries like Singapore and America. America introduced triple P, the paycheck payment package, and also Singapore is moving up by helping with up to 75%. So these are very, very good ways that countries is trying to avoid the depression. But are all countries able to do that? So that's a very good question, right? Which the next slide, I will share with you how it's going to be like. Last but not least, how long will it take before we can get out of this lockdown? You know, Singapore government has announced another month. Malaysian government has announced half a month. And later on, I'd like to hear from the participants here in your own individual countries like India, Indonesia, how it's going to be. But regardless of that, how are we going to face the market uncertainties, right? Especially from the angle of consumers. Consumers are afraid. I think everybody has cash flow issues, blah, 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 and all that. So, and big corporations are now talking about how they're going to cut discretionary spending. So there's always a happy ending to a negative story. What we were told is in the long run, any firm that adopt the next three trends will be able to survive, right? As in always, I think Darwin has taught us it's always the survival of the fittest. I think as a world now facing this pandemic, we have to try to survive based on adaptation. What are the three ways that we have to adapt to? Technology, of course, and the ability to accept that the supply chain is not going to be as freewheeling as it is. How are we going to continue to do what we do, or can we abandon our old supply chain and develop new supply chain? And last but not least, it is already coming. Microsoft, Alibaba, all the oligopolies are happening at the corporate level where they will work with each other and get together. The next slide, I will share a very interesting scenario concept. Now, please focus on the top right hand here first. Now, there will be 5 conditions to the scenarios. One is how severe will the pandemic be and how will the disease progress? As we sit here, we are hearing there could be a second wave. Will there be a third wave? Or will the virus mutate? We are hearing that they are mutating. So we have this uncertainty that we have to deal with, and hopefully the healthcare profession can help us to stabilize the pandemic severity. Second, very important point, which is everybody is aware of, and no thanks to China and US fighting over each other, the level of collaboration will determine how fast we will get out of this pandemic crisis. Now, third one, healthcare system. We need now to understand, and I don't think it's about understanding, right? The flattening of the curve has one very important factor, which is how many beds, how many ventilators do you have, right? To be able to stabilize the number of deaths or even reduce the number of deaths. So that's very important during a COVID-19 pandemic for a recovery factor. Fourth, what are the economic consequences of this crisis, right? I mean, we're talking about Virgin Atlantic having to maybe file for bankruptcy. So lots and lots of industry are going to be affected. So how would that what will that have in terms of translating down to the issues on the ground, to people like you and me? Then the Americans state by state differ in the way they want to handle the social distancing. I think that's a very, very big issue amongst society now. With the more advanced the country, the more problems we have on this topic number 5. Now, having said all this, and this chart comes from Deloitte in conjunction with Salesforce, a brilliant chart that they have. Let me try to put on my highlighter now. On this scale, you see this is the level of collaboration. Marginal means very little, and significant collaboration means a lot of collaborations. That means that's good. People are working together. Now, on this axis, you see the severity of the pandemic. That means will there be a COVID-19 2.0? The best case scenario is here. It's just passing storm. Passing storm means the pandemic doesn't go into level 2, level 3. The pandemic stops. We get an antidote, and it's a great story. And on the other axis, countries work together. They share information. They help each other. And before you know it, it's like a storm. It's going to go away. And Hsia, just like the storm behind your back just now, it will go away in the next hour or 2. But on this is just the best case scenario. And I think there's a lot of hypotheses on this might not happening now. So what is the other hypothesis? The other one would be sunrise in the east. Sunrise in the east, which is over here, shows a scenario where US may not want to work with China. For my Indian friends calling in, we will be able to work closely together as a cluster. And then with that, regardless of what the pandemic impact is, we will persevere and get out of this in a matter of time, maybe a year, maybe 2. So, but that's for, depends on a lot of factors to come in. The other one that is of interest would be good companies. This is where, if government doesn't want to work with each other, the private, big multinationals and the private sector will work with each other. Alibaba has just shared in the web the design and operational aspect of building up a hospital. It's brilliant. I read the document and they share everything. So any country can download that document and start building your hospital within a year. Within 1 month. The worst case scenario will be the lone wolf. The lone wolf will be that no company, no inter-country collaboration, no private sector wanting to step up to help. Yes, then as you can see from this graph, for the next 2, 3, 5 years, we will continue to be locked down. We will continue to be suffering with cash flow issues, etc., etc. Okay, so much about scenarios, and then let me move on to the next slide. So how does those scenarios map onto our business environment now? In any business environment, I like to talk about the bad, but I also like to talk about the good. So if we put on the negative hat, stock market has still falling. You get ghost towns, the stuff that you see in a movie, right? A scary movie. And also with factories shut down, how long can businesses survive? Oil, that's an interesting one, right? Negative futures, and it's an indication because nobody's buying, nobody has the storage space. What are they going to do with oil, right? Oil suddenly becomes a commodity that not many people want. So that's scary, right? Transportation, car parks down, car warning sales will be down. Less people are traveling because of social distancing and lockdowns. I think it's going to carry on in the future. So that's going to be a big hit on the transportation industry. And sad to say, judging from research done, most firms can only last 3 to 6 months with their existing cash flow. Unless, of course, we try to help these firms, especially the small and medium-sized firms, to get back up so that they don't get into a situation where there will be a crisis, right? Europe is not excused. They are also struggling as well. So that's a very big concern. Now, on the positive side, you get many great corporations stepping up to try to boost up the economy, right? Louis Vuitton, for once, stopped selling expensive stuff, and they are now selling hand sanitizers, right? McDonald's survived by going through drive-thrus, which ultimately might reduce their cost of operations, right? Because people will drive through, people are not allowed to be sitting inside the restaurant. So it might turn out to be better for them, actually, in terms of operational costs. General Motors, they are a good M&E company. They can get things done. Now, this crisis will give rise to some booming businesses. Foodstuff, hygiene, tech companies, communications, deliveries, pharmaceutical, and traditional Chinese medicine. So you get adaptations like on this side. People are eating in the restaurant, but you just have to put a transparent glass to spread each other. Now, you can go shopping, but you just have to practice social distancing. So there is light at the end of a tunnel. So everyone online, don't feel so gloomy. I think as a human mankind, we will adapt. So my company that I've set up, FIFOYO is a Internet of Things company that I set up together with a couple of founding members about 1.5 years ago. We help facilities operations to digitalize their operations as such, so that they can run their business better. So I'm not going to go into detail today. So but I'm happy to entertain any questions later on what we do. But in terms of an IoT startup like ours, what would be the risk of us doing business during the COVID-19 era? There are 3 angles of risk that we have to evaluate. One is on operational risk. You have quarantines, you have travel restrictions, you have work closures. So that is operational risk that we're going to take. So the second one will be supply chain, as I mentioned just now, with borders closing. A lot of things that we want to procure cannot come through to our office. So that's another thing that we need to think about. How is our business continuity plan, right? So that's something that we need to look into. Cash is king in a business. So all of us will have to evaluate our credit risk. I just had a call with my largest client, and they have asked for help to defer their payments by another 60 days. So those kind of conversations is ongoing. Now, market risk. How is your competitor going to survive, right? Yeah, just like us, we are struggling. They are struggling as well. So we have to evaluate from that angle as well, right? I think many of you will heard all these our forefathers who are good business entrepreneurs talking about how their business will never shake, because during the tough times they are the ones that support the suppliers, and during a tough time in return the suppliers will continue to support them. So that's something for us to think about during times like this. Last but not least, technology is important. Okay. So internally, from a micro level, FIFOYO we ask ourselves, what are the key touch points in our deliverance of service and conducting our business? In IoT internet startup, we have the client touch point. We touch base with our clients and we do business with our clients, and they are key to our success. Delivery of our services, which is very, very important. And we need cash flow to continue on what we're doing. And of course, we can't just survive based on what we have now, which is shrinking. We've got to think of ways to grow the business, and we have to think of ways on how to use in the new way of marketing it. Because in the past, we have to do marketing through a lot of contact. So with the post-COVID-19 focus area, I try to simplify it into three. I think all of you will probably have heard it from what your government has told you. With these three things that we have to focus on, we did a acid test on touch points, key touch points on the left-hand side here, and we pump it over onto here, this portion here, and then we put the three COVID-19 new environmental limitations that we have, and it's quite easy to understand here, right? Green means no issue, yellow means there is some degree of risk. So with this in mind, I think we went back and say, okay, fine. So those stuff are good. We continue doing it as it is. Those stuff that are not good, we've got to make some changes to the way we carried out those touch points. So operationally, what does that mean, right? I think using COVID-19 terminology is going to be good, and client will understand, oh yeah, I need an antidote, I'm in trouble. So that's one way that we can approach our client. Second one is we have to change the charging model. Last time, cash flow is not an issue with our clients, but now it is. So what do? We have to help our client by defraying the upfront cost and move it into a subscription cost. In the past, we can develop our own solutions. And because we have the cash flow to fund research or to fund development costs upfront, but now we don't. Now what do? Right? We want to minimize our cash out. We want to maximize our cash in. So what we do is we go into external collaborations. Last but not least, funding, right? Last time, when we need additional money, we go to the banks, we go and look for crowdfunding, venture capitalists. But you know what? The three financial institution is struggling, and it will be foolhardy to think that they have lots and lots of money to fund us. So what do? Now you got a lot of distressed businesses outside there, right? So what we can do is we can look for somebody who wants to move out of their business, but they have some cash reserves, and that's where we will be able to get that funding from that additional source of funds. So I think I've spoken enough.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for your sharing this afternoon. Now, some of you may have questions for Chris, but please hold on for a while. We will have the Q&A session afterwards. So now we would like to introduce or invite the next speaker, Mr. Chin Beng, to give us his point of view. Chin Beng, please.
Yes, hello everybody. I'll be sharing my screen. All right. Let me see. Okay. All right. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for spending your time here. And I'd like to thank NTU Alumni Office as well as all the staff, Beng Hooi and Professor Hsia, who has been very kind to help host this webinar. I'm CV Lim Chin Beng. I am the Managing Director of Strong Force Malaysia, a small subcontractor company specializing in post-sanctioning. All right. Well, I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 and the impact on the construction industry from my point of view as a subcontractor. When the Malaysian Finance Minister last year announced the 2020 budget, the construction sector remains buoyant, and our CIDB has said that it will be the economic driving force. So we started off the year full of jazz, full of enthusiasm. And rightly so because it has been shown that for the most part of 2019, right, the number of projects has actually increased. There's an increase in number of projects, as you can see in the chart that's right in front. And more loans and approvals has been granted for the construction projects, right? Production of material has also increased. So the outlook in all has been very good. Okay, and the construction industry in Malaysia actually employs up to 8.6% of total employment, and that would translate into about 1.3 million people from their workforce, and contributes about 4% of GDP to the economy, and 70 billion ringgit is expected for this year. However, like a bolt of lightning, in March and April, we have all gone through this, the COVID-19 strike, and contractors are screaming for a lifeline. Why? Because contractors has been having a very tough life, and to top it all, the MCO or our movement control order has been extended to May 12, 2020. Now, I will touch on the pre-MCO times, then I'll touch on the present, and then the post-MCO. As you can obviously see that subcontractors are linked with the main contractors, and then we have suppliers, workers, and we are all really spiraling down into a funnel and into uncharted territory. Okay, pre-MCO days, construction has always been a very tough market. It is a cash flow business. Why? If we look at this from our construction industry's statistics, you can see that the index of tender prices in 2020 is hovering in 170 range. Whereas if you look towards your left of the chart, year 2014 or 2014 is also hovering around the same area. So prices have not changed very much, but we are expected more to perform better and more in the present industry. Although projects in 2019 has increased, right? You can look at between 2017 at the top of the chart, 2018 and 2019, but the value of work has not changed very much. You know, it's hovering about the same region. So it already has been very tough. And it's a cash flow business, and construction industry is very different from the other trading business. where you submit your billing, you send your billing, your invoice, you will expect to be paid. But we have several steps before we can expect to be paid or can demand for payment. Is that we have to submit a progress claims, which is usually in a 30-day cycle. This in turn will have to be vetted and verified by the client's quantity surveyors or their consultants, normally 15 days after a submission, and they will issue us a payment cert. But this payment certificate normally will have a 5% retention sum, which we don't see until end of the project or way after the end. Then comes a waiting period when we can get paid, which is normally a 45-day period or 60 days. And in some cases, some paymasters do drag us until 90 days. So all these progress claims, there's always some downsides when the main contractor may give you excuses that they cannot pay you because the client has not paid them. But although such practice is already outlawed in the CIDB Act, but contractors are still some contractors are still doing that. And during verification period, the various excuses of mismatch in quantities, and we normally don't get the payment certificate that shows the full figure that we actually claim for. So documentation has always been very important. And however, contractors has always been very weak in such matters. Then again comes the retention sum. Now, normally our projects may run only in the 10 to 15% kind of profit margin, right? But retention sum of 5% will remain uncollected for as long as 2 years after our project is finished. Okay. So presently, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually necessitated a movement control order in Malaysia, and construction site has been deemed non-essential, and all sites have been shut down since 18th of March. And it will continue on until May 12, although the government has relaxed a little bit to allow some sites with urgent works to resume works. But applying for approval and permission has been very lethargic and very lengthy. All right. And then contractors are faced with low or insufficient cash flow. We have always had threats to cash flow, exposed to material prices. We are exposed to cost of making good or back charges. Labor cost has been increasing. There's always a fear of the banks recalling our project loans. And to add on to it, we will have the new health and safety regulations post-COVID-19. And of course, continuing salaries, rents, and loan obligations during this period of non-productivity. We still have to carry on. And MCO has already impacted us in such a way that in March and April, where we have been very low collection for works done in January, and March and April and part of May will have zero productivity, so no revenue, and we'll be looking at zero collection in May or June, 2 months down the line. So the age market has also predicted that SME will see zero cash flow or zero cash inflow for at least 3 months. 30% of SMEs will have cash flow for only 1 month, another 37% for April. So for 2 months, it will be a bad situation. And the following 3 or 4 months, maybe up to 6 months. Now, we are all looking forward to post-MCO, but again, will come its own problems. If all work sites were to resume work immediately, there will be a great demand for material and labor. And then to resume start works at the sites, you need to remobilize your teams in. You need cash flow. For the remobilization, as well as to fulfill the additional health obligations. Then, of course, you have contractual obligations and legal threats, which we will have to look at it. Right. Materials, for Malaysia's situation, we have been importing most of our building materials, especially steel products, from China. And China has stopped operations for 3 months prior to this, and it just resumed operations. So we have to look at the availability of materials. Luckily, cement products are locally available. For the workers, we have both documented and undocumented workers. Some may have left the country for their home country, but may not return, right? Then again, we will face pressure from contractual obligations. And many of us subcontractors, we really do not know how to react to all this. Force majeure clauses may be applicable, right? But we'll leave this to the legal experts, right? We just have to cross the bridge when we get to it. Luckily for us, the government have done and announced a stimulus package. Not as great as what other neighboring countries have announced, but they have instructed the banks to have a moratorium of 6 months on repayment of bank financing. Interest for these 6 months will still run. We still have to pay in the end, but they have agreed not to compound the interest. Relief financing package of 5 billion at a maximum interest rate of 3.5% has been offered to SMEs. And another financing package of 6.8 billion allocation has, but this one comes with a condition that you will have to negotiate the interest rates with your banks. Government has got some wage subsidy package, right, and employee retention package to help the SMEs. 5.9 billion has been offered to offset the cost, but subject to numerous conditions. So for the contractors and construction industry, looking at this stimulus package, we find that most of it has been geared or targeted for the smaller grading contractors. We have G1 to G7, where G1 is the lower grade and G7 is the highest. So G1 to G4 contractors has been given quite some leeway, and they have actually been allowed to continue some of their work. But G5 to G7 contractors, which altogether there are 17,000 companies employing 850,000 workers, right? So we are pretty much left on our own. Our CIDB, Construction Industry Board, actually has a cash balance of 700 million, of which 400 million they have placed in short-term deposits. Now, it gives to mind is that CIDB is supposed to be a non-profit organization, but they're making money of the short-term deposits. And to date, the CIDB, together with the Works Ministry, has not offered any mitigation or recovery plans. We have yet to hear some good news from them. We felt that the CIDB should release some of these sums back to the industry to boost up the industry, perhaps to reimburse foreign labor levy. They have actually deferred certain foreign labor levy for this year, right? And maybe propose some moratorium to defer tax payment, right? Noted that I use the word defer, not don't pay tax, but defer, but we have to pay it somehow. And following sentiments, there's fear that the private sector may hold back on their projects, may not proceed. So to create more work, the government will have to proceed with most of the planned infrastructure projects, like the third phase of the MRT, and also affordable housing, and viewing the condition of our healthcare, maybe perhaps build more hospitals or decentralize to build more smaller hospitals outside the main urban area. Okay, so how to move forward post-MCO, or rather post-COVID, the end of COVID-19, we have not really seen it. To a lot of companies, or most of companies, we treasure our employees, which is of paramount importance. So their health and safety is important. We have to look at that. Many of the SMEs will have to restructure the company to survive financially. We have to reevaluate our supply chain, right? To rely less on foreign imported materials. And of course, we have to find ways to reduce manpower and to use technology as an advantage. That's what has been postulated by my colleague Chris Choy earlier on. So work office and work site has to practice safe hygienes, right? Sanitation of workspace and workers' accommodation, as can be learned during the past 1 or 2 weeks, both in Malaysia and Singapore. We find that the workers' accommodation dormitories could be a big cluster of COVID-19. After the 6 months moratorium, I believe that contractors or most SME will need to re-engage the banks and our suppliers to restructure payment terms. We may look at more of local suppliers mentioned earlier on. And manpower is definitely a thing that we have to look at to reduce our reliance, because manpower always exposes to cost increase and unpredictable productivity. We have to look into mechanization and digitization of our work methods. So I've inserted this slide here. It will be my last slide here. That even without the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that the building industry activities is running and is flattening post-2020. But I inserted 2 lines here, yellow and blue, if you can see whether it will run as it is. We all hope that it will be following the yellow curve, but we are not sure. It could be the blue curve, because we are all going into uncharted territory, and we can only pray and do our best for all this. So basically, thank you for your attention, and thank the Alumni Office, and also Chris Choy for giving such a good overview of the COVID-19 scenario, and giving us such a good insight. And by the way, both Chris and myself, we graduated in 1986 from NTI, and there was the infancy of NTU. Thank you very much. Over back to you, Th'ng Beng.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris and Chin Beng. Fantastic sharing. So for the audience, we have Q&A now. So there is a chat function in Zoom. So if you have questions, please feel free to post these questions on the chat function. So I already have a couple of questions coming in. The first one actually is for Chris. Let me just read this question. Chris, do you think new companies will be willing to invest in IoT given the lack of cash flow? Would these companies be willing to allocate funds? And part of it also, will the demand for IoT increase or decrease? Over to you, Chris.
I wrote down, one is when new companies continue to invest in IoT. Second one is in the COVID situation, will IoT's applications go up or come down? Is that correct? And yes. May I ask who?
This is from Mayank, who graduated in 2016 from EEE.
And the 16, okay. So I called it the 2000 series. Chin Beng and I are from the 19th century series. So, okay, fine. So, okay, Mayank, thanks. Great question. I think IoT is here to stay. And with the social distancing and with the inability for us to engage more and more people to do work, right, for whatever reasons, the only way to conduct break, getting that petrol out, putting the products out, all of these can be enhanced and has been proven to be enhanced in IoT applications. So the answer is a big yes. In fact, for some good reason, that's why people like me are one of those few people who is smiling when the pandemic comes in. It has actually accelerated the demand for IoT applications. So I hope I've answered your questions, Mayank.
Okay, the next question I believe is for Chin Beng. Post MCO, from the angle of employer, will they look into local workers rather than to continue to employ foreign workers, maybe because of better efficiency and attendance, since the unemployment will rise? Chin Beng, you want to comment?
Thank you, Beng Hooi. Yeah, thank you for that question. It is a question that has been always crossed our minds for the past few years, even 10 years before. But the problem with perception of construction industry as the 3 days, dirty, dangerous, and then people don't see much prestige in working in such industries. Well, foreign workers, I believe we will still have to rely on them, but we have to look into cutting the reliance. And as a matter of fact, my personal opinion in the construction industry, and I believe it runs across all industries, is that we have been putting too much emphasis on having graduates, and until that we have a vacuum below the graduate level, there's a vacuum of technician level diploma holders that we actually see a vacuum of. These are actually the workhorse. Then, of course, you have the worker level. So if locally we can train more people or entice them to join the construction industry and be at the diploma or the technician levels, that would actually help a lot. And as of workers, contractors or companies willing to invest in mechanization will be able to reap more benefits, and then they can reduce the reliance of the workforce. But for the time being, they will have to stay. But I think we have to start taking better care of our foreign workers, giving them better environment and cleanliness for their accommodation. So I hope that answers the questions, Mutada. Thank you.
Thank you, Chin Beng. The third question should be applicable for both speakers. SMEs in Malaysia can approach the EPF to restructure their employer contributions, right? So EPF in Malaysia is the Provident Fund. So the question is, have you or your peers tried it? Is it useful or viable option? Over to you, both speakers.
Well, who want to go first? Chai?
You go first. You're the hero.
Okay. Regards to this policy of reducing or rather exempting the employers from contributing the employer's portion, in Malaysia's case, it's 12%. So it will actually help a little bit in the cash flow, right? And at the same time, the EPF has also asked the workers, employees themselves, whether they would like to reduce their contribution. That means putting more money into their pockets. So from 11% to 7%. Right? So the employer's reduction portion, depending how big a workforce you have, right, and how it will impact, but it will help at least. Right? It will help at least. Chris?
Okay. What is EPF? I think for those of you who is dialing in and in your own countries, your government will probably want to make sure that when you are retiring at your retirement age, like in Singapore is 60 plus, and in Malaysia is from 55 goes to 60. They want to make sure that you have enough funds in a certain funding institution that you can draw out, and so that you're not a burden to the society, right? So I think you all know what I'm trying to say. By allowing the withdrawal from EPF now, one has to ascertain that you have other investments and liquid assets, or liquid assets is not a problem. You can take it out. Your fixed assets that you're stuck with, all right, that you can't liquidate it and tie you through this current cash trap situation. So then it's a good idea. But if you are someone that you don't have either liquid or fixed assets, and you take away from your EPF, and bear in mind that the next 10 years would be economically different, and may I use the word difficult years for somebody who has not saved enough money. I'm sorry, those are all of 70 plus, or you're outside there, those of you are in the range of 30s and the 40s ages, this is going to be crucial. If I were you, I'll think twice before wanting to dip into your EPF to try to tie through this.
I think basically that's all the questions we have from what I see in the chat. So I would like to once again thank both speakers, Chris and also Chin Beng. Okay, everyone, thank you very much.